To construct a nation, you have to imagine it first. Belarus is in the position of being in the sway of West and East. Sitting on the fence may be the most uncomfortable position, but Alexander Lukashenko, the Belarusian leader, has so far bet on the East. So, Belarus between East and West as ever. Join me, Jan Darasz, on how we got here.
Belarus's complicity in the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine has noticeably strengthened ties between Minsk and Moscow and brought their alliance one step closer to full integration. As is the case for many European countries, the territory of today's Belarus has passed from one hand to another over the centuries and has been the subject of conflict between the region's major powers. Belarus largely adopted its present borders as the Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic, which was part of the Soviet Union from 1920 to 1991. The centuries-old turbulent relationship between Belarus and Russia is largely a legacy of their shared East Slavic origins and Soviet past, when power was heavily concentrated in Moscow. During the Cold War, Belarus was home to Soviet nuclear weapons and military bases, and the leaders of Russia and Belarus, as well as Ukraine, played a significant role in bringing about the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Prior to 2020, Belarus was still considered to be a relatively open, albeit highly centralized middle-income economy noted for its IT industry. It also participated in the EU's Eastern Partnership and was well on its way to joining the World Trade Organization. However, Lukashenko's actions and the resulting Western sanctions have isolated Belarus's market and increased its dependence on Russia. Meanwhile, thousands of valuable companies and workers have left Belarus. In September 2023, the EU called on the International Criminal Court to indict and arrest Lukashenko for war crimes he allegedly committed during the war in Ukraine.
I'm delighted to welcome Anatol Kotau to the programme, and he is a member of the Temporary Council of the Belarusian Democratic Forces Forum. So welcome to the programme.
Welcome. Oh, thanks.
Okay. It's great to have you. Let's start off with the recent speech of Alexander Lukashenko, the leader of current-day Belarus. He threatened the integrity of places like Poland and the Baltic states. Is he just speaking out ancient animosities against Poland, against the Baltic states, or is it just a very modern thing? How do you see that?
Actually, it's not a very modern thing. It's the common narrative with Russia, which is going back to the Soviet narratives when all these states, Poland and Baltic states, were not independent. Actually, they were not sovereign, and they were not being viewed even as states by Russia. And Lukashenko, he is just transmitting and disseminating the contemporary Russian narrative when he is a ruler of the part of the big state which he thinks he belongs to, some sort of common empire with Russia, when he can threaten his neighbors who are seems to be weaker than this big monster. That's it.
It seems like another bluster by an eastern neighbour. If we keep onward to the contemporary theme and go over to Ukraine, I'd like to just talk about there's a very interesting military unit composed of Belarusian citizens, personnel, ethnic Belarusians fighting for Ukraine, and they're called the Konstanty Kalinovsky Regiment. So they're fighting for contemporary Ukraine, but they also have on their uniforms the badge of the modern Belarusian flag, and the symbolism of the Belarusian flag. Their hero, their patron is Konstanty Kalinovsky in the Polish language, a nobleman who fought in the 1863 uprising. What against Russia for these smaller states, Ukraine, Belarus, and Poland in 1863? What would a present day, do you think, soldier fighting in that unit? How do they envisage what kind of country they want to see?
Actually, now we can see that the idea of the Konstanty Kalinovsky regiment and of their vision is also dating back to the times of Rzeczpospolita or the common state of Poland and Great Duchy of Lithuania, because they are not fighting only for Ukraine, they are fighting for the vision of the region when Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine and Poland were united, and then they, like now, had the common enemy, the common foe, which was constantly trying to steal their history, to steal their lives, and to destroy their countries, to conquer them. So it's not only just fighting for Ukraine, because at the beginning of this phase of the conflict in 2022, because the war against Ukraine actually has started in 2014, that everybody understood that if Ukraine falls, then Belarus will have no chance to be independent, and then all the countries in the region, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, will be in real danger, because Russia will not stop if it wins Ukraine. So it was fight for Ukraine, for some perspective for Belarus, and now we can say that it's the fight for the vision of the common future.
A very noble ideal, but are they fighting for a country in the current borders? Because as we were talking earlier, the Belarus is divided, if we can say that, into the Westerners and the Easterners, the Eastern-orientated pro-Russian sector of the population, the pro-Western. How does someone resolve that? Two nations, two different directions fighting within the same, for the same land within the same borders?
You see, in the case of Belarus, it will be easier to solve this problem of some sort of division of the country on in two parts. The western part, which is in Grodno and Brest, which were now even historically closer to the west, to Poland, and the eastern part, which is the poorest part of the country, which is more closer to Russia. People are traveling to Russia to earn money, to work, and it's easier to communicate with Russia when with the West from the linguistic point of view. But still, these two countries, these two parts of the country, they are not so different. And if there is a chance, and I can say that it could be proven even by the contemporary history of Belarus, and in early 90s there were, let's say, 5-6 years of real democracy and independence, when new or real view on Belarusian history was brought into the schools and universities. Then it was the flourish of Belarusian nation. So if there is a chance to get back to the roots, to our real history, then it will be easier to unite these two parts of Belarus in a solid state.
Before we move on to the historiography, as you mentioned there, is this division based on town and country, or region, east against west, peasant heritage against sort of Polonized aristocratic heritage? How do you see that?
Actually, it's now it's more based on the knowing of foreign languages, on knowledge of foreign languages, and on the openness to the West. Of course, western parts of the Belarus, they were historically closer to the West. People are traveling to the West. They are trading. Even this small counter-border trade is a key to be more open to the West.
Speaking English rather than Latin.
Speaking English rather than Latin, yeah, that's true. And of course, for the eastern part, it's easier to communicate in Russian with their Russian colleagues on the other side of the border.
You mentioned this as we were talking before we came into the studio. This idea, this reality for you as a historian. You learned there were 4 different versions of the history of the same area. Can you just talk us through that?
Yes, because I would say to some extent my situation from the point of view of education is unique, because I was starting my education before the Soviet Union collapsed, and I had all the Soviet doctrine in the school. Then in early 90s there was no more Soviet Union, and new books new handbooks, textbooks on history of Belarus were brought into the school, and not only to the school but also to the universities, and that was a Belarusian view on Belarusian history, and that was a little bit shocking because it was totally different if we speak about the Soviet vision. And then I moved to Moscow to study in Moscow State Institute of Foreign Relations, but in a Polish group, so I had 2 more visions of the history of this region, Russian and Polish one. And of course, Russian is the most, arrogant if we speak about Belarus. It's easier and it's closer, even speaking about difficult issues with Poland, about our common past, yes. To debate and to find some solution. And actually this vision we've been speaking a minute before, for what is Kalinowski regiment is fighting for, is the solution to these probable tensions on the historical facts, because these 4 versions of history, they were.
What would be those areas of contention between Poland and Belarus in particular? Can you identify?
You see the ideas of Rzeczpospolita. Belarus lived in 3 Rzeczpospolitas, in different versions of Rzeczpospolita, and the last was not the best solution for Belarusians, but even it was better than Russian Empire. So it's from my point of view, it's easier to have some debate with Polish scientists, with Polish specialists on history, to identify difficult issues in our common past and to say that it should remain in our past. And now we have to develop totally new relationship between the nations.
Is the idea of yourself as a Belarusian man, is that a relatively new form of consciousness for being Belarusian, or is this, how would you evolve the progress of being a Belarusian instead of just being somebody from a particular locality, or a national man with a national consciousness, educated? Is it a recent educational move, or how could you delineate this?
You see, if we speak about not about the individuals who were fans of Belarus, even in Soviet times. I don't know, for example, we can take Zenon Pozniak. He was, and he is a legendary man in Belarusian contemporary history, who actually started to build this interest to Belarus in the past for contemporary Belarusians. There were only 2 I would say, periods in contemporary history of Belarus, then it was popular to be Belarusian and to discover that you are Belarusian. It was in early 90s, during these 5-6 years of democracy and freedom, and it has begun at a larger scale in 2020. Then Belarusians who declared that they don't want to have Lukashenko anymore in any way. They started to get back to the roots, to the national symbols, to dig into the history, and to understand that they are really some sort of nation which totally differ from Russia, from Ukraine, and which has to be independent and should go more like its real historical way to be more a part of the West.
The final question as we wind up our conversation, you mentioned that Alexander Lukashenko is pushing people like you, the educated class, out of the country, and the East is moving west. I mean, it's a very difficult future for modern Belarus, is it not? It's becoming Easternized.
Yes, that's true. And from this point of view, it's some sort of catastrophe for the nation, because we don't know exactly how many people moved or were forced to flee the country since 2020, but it's hundreds of thousands of people, and they are most like national or West oriented, and there is less and less Belarus inside the country, and actually it goes in line with Russian interest. Russia wants to destroy Ukraine, and it has and it's destroying Belarus, but with other means.
On that note, Anatol Kotar, thank you very much for coming into the programme. Fascinating talk.
Thank you for the invitation.
And that's all we have time for today. So join us again on How We Got Here.